Zach, is this still happening, but not really happening? How should we be thinking about the prospects for something on the border passing through Congress now?
This is a really critical juncture for this package of border security legislation that's been tied for the last couple of weeks now to aid not just for Ukraine, but as well as Israel and Taiwan. There were a number of meetings among Senate Republicans this week trying to get a better sense of what's actually in this deal. Our understanding is about 90% of it has been written in negotiations with not just Senators James Lankford, Kyrsten Sinema, Chris Murphy, but as well as representatives from the White House. But I think the reality is set again that if you have former President Trump, who just won the New Hampshire primary and the Iowa caucuses before that, railing against any potential deal that is going to win Democratic support, that they should just wait until he comes back into office. Now, Republican leadership has said they still want to get a deal. McConnell himself told our colleague Eric Wasson that they're still negotiating. They're hoping to get something done, in part because Ukraine aid is going to be really hard to move through both the Senate and the House without some sort of enticement for Republican senators who are critical of Ukraine aid to get that job done as well. And so we'll have to wait and see how this text finally comes out. There's certainly going to be some skeptics of it in the Senate Republican conference, and certainly some Democrats as well. But as far as we know, certainly Trump's comments have made it harder, but that a deal is still on the table.
So is Donald Trump now essentially the Speaker of the House and the Republican leader in the Senate?
I think it's undeniable. He has a lot of influence here, and Republicans will certainly tell you that. I think McConnell may have alluded to that yesterday in talks, but Republican leadership is still pretty insistent that this is the best opportunity they have to really get a border deal done. They've gotten more concessions from Democrats in the last couple of weeks than they ever got during the Trump administration on any sort of border package. And so certainly Trump saying, leave this to me to deal with when we get there, falling on deaf ears, even among some hard right Republicans who have said, because the border crisis is such a clear and present danger, as Senator Ron Johnson, the Republican from Wisconsin, told me, they want to see something get done. The question is, does it survive the House? Does Speaker Mike Johnson put this on the floor, probably on a suspension vote that would require bipartisan support, even if he ends up losing hard right Republicans who, if you're Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, has talked about actually ousting him from that job if it included aid for Ukraine. So there's a narrow path for this deal still to happen, and certainly the power players actually crafting it are still at the table.
Okay, so that's one deal, Zach. We also have another deal that actually has already been made and marked up, that tax deal, bipartisan, between the Senate Finance Leader, Senator Wyden, and the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, Jason Smith. They had the deal. They marked it up. Now it seems like we're running into issues. Is this, too, something that just isn't going to be able to get adequate support?
Certainly, it's not going to make that January 29th deadline that Finance Chairman Ron Wyden had posited for the beginning of tax filings season. Any sort of tax package was going to be difficult, certainly in an election year, as we've been discussing. Sometimes lawmakers would prefer to leave something to after the 2024 elections, when maybe a different configuration of power would lead to a better deal. It did get marked up out of the House Ways and Means Committee, the tax writing panel, on a pretty substantial bipartisan vote, I think 40-3, if I'm remembering correctly, and should be going to the House floor as soon as next week, maybe later than that. If that comes out of the House with a really strong bipartisan vote, it would go over to the Senate, where Mike Crapo, the top Republican on the Finance Committee, told me yesterday they expect an opportunity to amend that bill on the floor of the Senate. What that means for its prospects of actually passing the Senate and going back to the House, that's a whole other issue.